Hi, folks. Today we are doing lesson 26, which is my attack thoughts are attacking my invulnerability. And we are reading the text, chapter 3, The Innocent Perception, section 4, Error and the Ego. Let's begin. The abilities you now possess are only shadows of your real strength. All of your present functions are divided and open to question and doubt. This is because you are not certain how you will use them and are therefore incapable of knowledge. You are also incapable of knowledge because you can still perceive lovelessly. Perception did not exist until the separation introduced degrees, aspects, and intervals. Spirit has no levels, and all conflict arises from the concept of levels. Only the levels of the Trinity are capable of unity. The levels created by the separation cannot but conflict. This is because they are meaningless to each other.
Consciousness, the level of perception, was the first split introduced into the mind after the separation, making the mind a perceiver rather than a creator. Consciousness is correctly identified as the domain of the ego. The ego is a wrong-minded attempt to perceive yourself as you wish to be, rather than you are. Yet you can know yourself only as you are, because that is all you can be sure of. Everything else is open to question.
So, what I'm getting from the bringing together of both of these paragraphs is that at this moment in time, what we have labeled consciousness is our egoic way of thinking. And because of that,
I'm not getting that because,
really?
It says that consciousness is the domain of the ego, that the ego exists within consciousness, but it doesn't mean that consciousness is ego.
I didn't say that it was necessarily.
It came across like you were saying that consciousness and ego is one and the same.
No, what I'm talking about is the way we are thinking now.
An egoic consciousness?
Yes.
Yes, that makes sense.
That's what I was talking about. Is that what we call consciousness is actually an egoic way of thinking right now. Because it's the way we perceive, it's the way we react and act in any given situation. Until we learn to change the way we think to Holy Spirit's right-minded thinking, to know what true consciousness is, which is being connected to ourselves, within ourselves, connecting and aligning ourselves with His thought system, that we become conscious in the literal sense, to understand how we are connected to everyone around us and everything around us. It's an entirely different type of consciousness here. So, as I was saying, what these two paragraphs are saying to me is that the way we have been trained to think and believe is an egoic consciousness. It's not true consciousness. True consciousness is thinking with Holy Spirit. It's a godlike consciousness to understand the connection between us and our brothers and every other being around us. Everything around us.
I still don't know if I completely agree with the way that you're saying that, because to label consciousness, what we call consciousness, as egoic consciousness, doesn't apply to everyone and everything. There are people who are enlightened and they are not egoic, and
Who's
to
enlightened?
throw them into
Who is enlightened?
Jesus was enlightened. So you can't say that Jesus was an egoic consciousness.
Jesus was awakened to himself when he was on the cross.
But he still had consciousness. So you're throwing everything under the label of consciousness and saying, well, that's what we call egoic consciousness.
Yeah, I think you're misunderstanding what I'm saying.
I might be. And I do know that the next paragraph, the next sentence of the next paragraph, if you don't mind me reading it, does clarify where it says the ego is the questioning aspect of the post-separation self, which was made rather than created. So the ego was made within consciousness from the idea of the separated self.
I'm getting it now. You are stuck on the word of consciousness in your definitions of it.
I'm not stuck on the word consciousness.
Well,
it just seems,
that's the word that
it just feels like what you're labeling, you're throwing everything within the label of consciousness and ego.
No, Alex, and that's where you are mistaken. I will state it again. The way we have been taught to think and believe is an egoic way of thinking. What we consider to be consciousness in this type of thinking isn't, because it's not right-minded thinking.
So in other
we
words,
aren't conscious.
So in other words, egoic thinking is
being asleep.
Right, but how does that have to do with consciousness? That's what I'm trying to understand.
Well, let's go to your scientific.
Because if you're asleep,
let me finish.
If you're asleep, you are unconscious.
Exactly. We call this conscious. Oh, we're conscious. We're awake. We're doing this. We're doing that.
But we're not.
It's egoic thinking. So what we call consciousness is egoic thinking.
And egoic thinking is the thought that derives from us thinking that we are separate from everything else.
Correct. So I reiterate that the way we are brought up to think and believe is egoic thinking, egoic consciousness, because we believe we are awake and we know what's what.
I think I realize the issue I have with you saying it that way, because it's an oxymoron to say egoic consciousness. It would be better said as egoic unconsciousness.
All I can go by is what Holy Spirit is saying to me in this instant. He's telling me what to say and how to say it.
Okay.
And he's wanting it to be very clear that what we are calling consciousness is not.
Right.
Which is why he is having me state it the way he is.
Okay. Well, the way it came across was confusing.
Your own thoughts on it is what I'm being told. Your own.
And that's why I asked the questions. Of course, it's my own thoughts, and that's why I brought it up.
All right, honey. Thank you. So 3, the ego is the questioning aspect of the post-separation self, which was made rather than created. It is capable of asking questions, but not of perceiving meaningful answers, because these would involve knowledge and cannot be perceived. The mind is therefore confused, because only one-mindedness can be without confusion. A separated or divided mind must be confused. It is necessarily uncertain about what it is. It has to be in conflict because it is out of accord with itself. This makes its aspects strangers to each other, and this is the essence of the fear-prone condition in which attack is always possible. You have every reason to feel afraid as you perceive yourself. This is why you cannot escape from fear until you realize that you did not and could not create yourself. You can never make your misperceptions true, and your creation is beyond your own error. That is why you must eventually choose to heal the separation. So here it's explaining to us why our egoic thinking is not capable of making the connections of why things are happening. It's unable to truly perceive the truth because everything it's creating around it is based off of fears, judgments, guilt, shame, all these things. So until one can learn to go within and look at these things and I want to say focus your attention on what is being shown you and look very closely, very deeply at the things that are being shown you, all of it, the feelings, the thoughts, the physical experiences you're having in that moment, the interactions you're having and the things being said to you. All of these things are connected. And when we can bring ourselves into that minute focus of seeing it, recognizing what's happening there in front of us, and taking it in and taking it to Holy Spirit and getting that clarity of what it is we're perceiving and dealing with, in those moments we will become one-minded with Holy Spirit to see the truth and then to be able to extend that truth to our brothers. Kind of like with the sharing that Alex and I just did a few moments ago about that word consciousness and how he was seeing it as I was trying to explain it in a different light than what it was being meant.
Well, that's why a dialogue is necessary to help
Yes.
clear up confusion. The verbal language is not perfect.
No.
So it sometimes does take a little bit of back and forth to understand the ideas being conveyed.
Yeah. And, it goes back to this, words are but symbols of symbols twice removed. And they only have the meanings we give them. Yes, we get a meaning from a dictionary that's given to us by society. Yet we have our own personal meaning we attach to them through the experiences we've had. We have a mental and emotional attachment to those words and what we think and feel it means to us, what belief we've placed into that word. And that's part of the process that we're looking at and dealing with here, is to undo those beliefs, to give clarity and understanding of the true meaning of the words being used, and not the meanings you have laid over them, transposed over them. Because every meaning that you have is distorted for these things that are being brought up, based on the things you've been taught. It's a huge roundabout circle, folks. It continues to manifest itself and repeat itself over and over and over until we cut that circle. We break it, and we break the cycle, and we learn who we are inside by looking at these things and changing the way we think and believe.
Right-mindedness is not to be confused with the knowing mind, because it is applicable only to right perception. You can be right-minded or wrong-minded, and even this is subject to degrees, clearly demonstrating that knowledge is not involved. The term right-mindedness is properly used as the correction for wrong-mindedness and applies to the state of mind that induces accurate perception. It is miracle-minded because it heals misperception and this is indeed a miracle in view of how you perceive yourself.
So, that first sentence there, right-mindedness is not to be confused with the knowing mind, because it is applicable only to right perception. And it kind of plays right along with what I was saying about what we think of as consciousness as being an egoic consciousness. And when we are in right-minded consciousness with Holy Spirit, He gives us a knowing of what's true. But the right-mindedness that it's speaking of here is the ability to see the truth, irregardless of what's happening around you. To see that absolute truth through all the fog and layers our brothers have laid before themselves, to hide who they truly are from themselves. It's seeing straight through all of it to the absolute truth. That is what he's talking about. Right-mindedness and right perception.
What particularly stands out to me is this one sentence here, second to last. And it says, the term right-mindedness is properly used as the correction for wrong-mindedness and applies to the state of mind that induces accurate perception.
Yeah.
And so when I think about that, and I think about, well, what is the state of mind that induces accurate perception? The state of mind that induces accurate perception is knowing who and what we are.
Yes.
Knowing who and what our brothers are, and knowing that it's simply us and our brothers misperceiving.
Exactly. And it's also being without the confusion of fears.
Right.
The everyday fears that all of us have gone through. Fear of walking out our front doors for fear of getting into a car accident, getting attacked, mugged, whatever. A child being afraid to go to school because they're getting bullied.
You know, the last sentence also, it says, it is miracle-minded because it heals misperception, and this is indeed a miracle in view of how you perceive yourself.
Exactly.
And so when I think about, well, what does that mean? It means that if ever I am upset for any reason,
It's
if ever
not for what
I
you think
that something has gone wrong, I simply need to shift into right-mindedness to be able to heal the misperception that I have that's causing me to be upset.
Correct. And that shift, the more you start looking at your thoughts and looking at these things you're thinking and believing and catching them on the fly as they come up, catching them and taking them within to Him, you will find yourself having a shift, a perceptual shift in everything you're doing. And the more you go within and look at these things, at everything He brings up for you, more and more, as corrections are given, you will shift your perceptions and your understandings to extend the truth that you've been shown. You will no longer continue to make the same errors in judgment. Errors in judgment, because in judging it is an error of thinking. And that is what you are learning to undo. To stop judging, to look and ask for the correction so you no longer judge what you are seeing as being good, bad, right, wrong.
Well, there's only one judgment, and that's innocent. And that's part of being right-mindedness. Once we get into a right-minded state and realize that we are all innocent, we can see the truth
Yes,
of what we're thinking and what our brothers are thinking and feeling.
exactly. So it's learning to shift from our egoic way of thinking to Holy Spirit's way of thinking, of looking at everything, analyzing it with Him to see what it is you have judged and misperceived. And folks, something's coming to my mind here about someone that's been having errors in misperceptions in regards to who and what they are, and how they keep picking and choosing what it is they are going to look at in their minds. Oh, I've looked at everything, I've healed everything, I've forgiven everything. Yet they are still continuing to seek outside themselves for the truth. They are still continuing to seek outside themselves for the answers to who they are, what they are. And they're not willing to do the actual work. They're only looking at the surface and picking and choosing what they think they need to look at, what they think is the problem. And until we willingly go within and look at all of it and do not pick and choose, we continue to have this sense of, I need to go here, I need to go there. We are spinning our proverbial wheels and going nowhere. We are locking ourselves down into this one single moment and not willing to look anywhere else but right there, and staying there, afraid to look forward and afraid to look back. And it's not that we are living in the moment in those instances, because we're not. We are locked down in a fear of not understanding who and what we are.
What you're saying here is reminding me of a paragraph, actually a sentence from A Course in Miracles.
Yes.
But I'd like to read the whole paragraph. It's
Okay.
from the Manual for Teachers.
Okay.
And it says, except for God's teachers, there would be little hope of salvation, for the world of sin would seem forever real. The self-deceiving must deceive, for they must teach deception. And what else is hell? This is a manual for teachers of God. They are not perfect, or they would not be here. And that's the line that came to mind right there. Yet it is their mission to become perfect here, and so they teach perfection over and over in many, many ways until they have learned it. And then they are seen no more, although their thoughts remain a source of strength and truth forever. Who are they? How are they chosen? What do they do? How can they work out their own salvation and the salvation of the world? This manual attempts to answer these questions.
Thank you. And that was just beautiful, because it's the absolute truth. You know, before we started to record this video, Alex and I had been talking about how it matters not how little or how few people we are in true contact with in our daily lives. Because each time we post something to Facebook or to YouTube with these videos, when we share our dialogues with each other, with the world at large, we don't know who's actually reading the stuff we're posting, irregardless if they're placing a like on it or not. And in that way, we never know who we are touching. And in that respect, when I first started bringing things to the attention of those that were claiming to be teachers of the Course, that was in direct contradiction to things they were saying, it took about 4 months before the things that I had been stating started being played out throughout the community with people repeating the things that I had been saying. And in that same way, as each thing that I seem to bring forward and share on, it's happening faster and faster, that it's not just within a couple of months like that. It's now happening within a couple of weeks, sometimes even a couple of days. And it's that kind of impact where it shows how we all have a single mass consciousness, that when one of us gets it, it's extended immediately to the rest of us. So as soon as I started healing myself of the diseases I had, and I shared that understanding with one other person, it immediately went out to everyone.
I don't know about immediate, and I don't know if one person is enough, but in theory, that sounds good.
Okay. I'm getting that it only takes me saying it to one, and for them to say it to one, and them to say it to one.
Right. But then that wouldn't be immediate, would it?
If it immediately changes their life, then yes.
You're talking about a mass consciousness, so it wouldn't be immediate. It would still take time to proliferate from one person to another.
Yeah. I see what you're saying. I just know that every time that something is shown to me and I share it, within a very short amount of time.
Well, like you said earlier, 4 months.
Yeah.
So, and it can depend. I mean, there's things that we've talked and shared about the day before, and then all of a sudden we see the same things being said and shared on Facebook.
Exactly. And that happens a lot.
Yeah.
And so it's recognizing that everything that we are thinking, everything that we are sharing in regards to these healings, and everything that you share, it reaches more than just your immediate circle. You may not know it, but it does. Let's go ahead and move on. 5. Perception always involves some misuse of mind because it brings the mind into areas of uncertainty. The mind is very active. When it chooses to be separated, it chooses to perceive. Until then, it wills only to know. Afterwards, it can only choose ambiguously, and the only way out of ambiguity is clear perception. The mind returns to its proper function only when it wills to know. This places it in the service of spirit, where perception is changed. The mind chooses to divide itself when it chooses to make its own levels. But it could not entirely separate itself from spirit, because it is from spirit that it derives its whole power to make or create. Even in miscreation, the mind is affirming its source, or it would merely cease to be. This is impossible because the mind belongs to spirit, which God created and which is therefore eternal. So, what I'm getting from this is that right now, with the way we perceive, it involves a misuse of mind.
Misuse of mind is seeing each other as separate.
Yeah. And that is the perception that we have chosen for ourselves at this time, is to perceive a separation. And until we willingly go within and ask for correction, it isn't until then, when our will steps up and says enough, that we can choose and choose again and choose differently. But we have to be willing to do so. And a lot of times we have to reach the bottom of the barrel before we choose to do so. And it's not until then when we do choose to and ask for that correction, that our mind will start returning to its proper function of knowing the truth and extending the truth without the illusion transposed over top of it, twisting it to something it is not.
I had to look up the word ambiguously, and dictionary.com says open to having several possible meanings or interpretations, equivocal. And so in the sentence where it says afterwards it can only choose ambiguously, and the only way out of ambiguity is clear perception, that makes sense. So in the previous sentence, it says, when it chooses to be separated, it chooses to perceive. And then until then, it wills only to know. Afterwards, it can only choose ambiguously, and the only way out of ambiguity is clear perception. The mind returns to its proper function only when it wills to know. And that stands out to me because when I am upset, I will often pray to the Holy Spirit for a correction of my mind because I know I must be misperceiving whenever I'm upset. And so the sentence, the mind returns to its proper function only when it wills to know, what that means is that my mind is going to its proper function when I am praying to know the truth.
Exactly. Exactly. And that is part of the process, is being willing to ask for correction. A lot of times things are spoken of in a sense of pride. And we need to recognize that pride is created out of the ego mind. And it's our pride that has us choose the things that we do out of shame, out of guilt, out of fear. And as Alex was just saying, with ambiguously, it kind of falls into line with how there's so many different spiritual beliefs and religions out there, and people are constantly choosing this one or that one, and they're hopping from one religion to the next, trying to find the truth. And this is the stuff he's talking about, because we're not in our right minds. We will continuously do this, seeking outside of ourselves for the truth, when all we need to do is stop and go within and seek the truth there.
Should I read the next paragraph?
Please.
The ability to perceive made the body possible, because you must perceive something with something. That is why perception involves an exchange or translation, which knowledge does not need. The interpretive function of perception, a distorted form of creation, then permits you to interpret the body as yourself in an attempt to escape from the conflict you have induced. Spirit, which knows, could not be reconciled with this loss of power, because it is incapable of darkness. This makes spirit almost inaccessible to the mind and entirely inaccessible to the body. Thereafter, spirit is perceived as a threat, because light abolishes darkness merely by showing you it is not there. Truth will always overcome error in this way. This cannot be an active process of correction because, as I have already emphasized, knowledge does not do anything. It can be perceived as an attacker, but it cannot attack. What you perceive as its attack is your own vague recognition that knowledge can always be remembered, never having been destroyed.
Thank you. Um, there's something that is being brought to my mind about a conversation that you and I were having shortly before this, about a dialogue we were having with someone online, and how uh, you had interpreted what I was saying as being harsh. And then I asked you, well, what I put out there, was it true? And you said, yes, it was. And the understanding that I have been given, that I am to give the absolute truth in all things, irregardless of how harsh it may be. I am not to treat anyone with kid gloves for any reason, simply because the choice is there to take the truth in or not. I'm not to pull anybody kicking and screaming into the light. Their choices are their choices. Their beliefs are their beliefs. And if that is what they choose to believe, then I'm to leave them in the hell of their choices. It is not for me to try and pull them out of it and change their minds. They have to willingly do that themselves. So the harshness that was being perceived is because it was an absolute truth, unvarnished in its entirety, without any need to be held up by anything but itself. And part of the problem that folks have is they don't want to hear the absolute truth. They'd rather be told a partial truth.
They'd rather be told a truth that is already in alignment of what they think.
Exactly. And if it's not in alignment, they simply don't want to accept it, or they feel like they're being attacked from it, or that it's overly harsh, when it's not. It's just the truth. So, sentence 9 in there where it says, it can be perceived as an attack, but it cannot attack. It's that right there in a nutshell, folks. The truth does not attack. It simply is. If you're feeling conflict inside when you're being given the truth, then it's time for you to look at what you are thinking and believing is the truth. Because that's your misperception at play there, if it creates conflict in your heart. 7. God and his creations remain in surety and therefore know that no miscreation exists. Truth cannot deal with errors that you want. I was a man who remembered spirit and its knowledge. As a man, I did not attempt to counteract error with knowledge, but to correct error from the bottom up. I demonstrated both the powerlessness of the body and the power of the mind. By uniting my will with that of my Creator, I naturally remembered spirit and its real purpose. I cannot unite your will with God's for you, but I can erase all misperceptions from your mind if you will bring it under my guidance. Only your misperceptions stand in your way. Without them, your choice is certain. Sane perception induces sane choosing. I cannot choose for you, but I can help you make your own right choice. Many are called, but few are chosen. Should be, all are called, but few choose to listen. Therefore, they do not choose right. The chosen ones are merely those who choose right sooner. Right minds can do this now, and they will find rest unto their souls. God knows you only in peace, and this is your reality. So, this plays right into what I was just saying a moment ago about folks taking the truth as being an attack and so forth. And how he says here that all are called, but few choose to listen. And that's what I was talking about. When the truth is handed you and you feel it is an attack, it is you who are not choosing to listen in that moment to what is being shown to you. And I'm not talking about a truth being repeated from a book or parroted from somebody else's mouth. I am talking about a truth that is being shared through the experiences and the lessons you have learned. As I talk about what happened to me with my grandmother and her force feeding me and kicking me across the room. As I talk about my rapes and molestations and the beatings I received as a child. In sharing those experiences and the lessons learned when I looked at those experiences in their entirety, that is the truth that I am extending forward, is the knowledge and understanding I have been given of what it was I was doing to myself, to show you of something that you may be doing to yourself as well, to help you look in deeper at what it is you are thinking and believing about yourself. This is how all of these things play forward. When we choose to go into our right-minded thinking with Holy Spirit, it's only then when we can extend and help heal our brothers as we are being healed. We give what we receive. And what we receive in right-minded thinking is what we are giving to our brothers. It's not judgments, it's not opinions, it's not something we read from a book, and it's not something that we were told by somebody else. It is simply going within our hearts and minds and seeing the truth of what we do. This was Chapter 3, The Innocent Perception, Section 4, Error and the Ego. We are now going to move on to the lesson of the day, which is lesson 26. My attack thoughts are attacking my invulnerability.
My attack thoughts are attacking my invulnerability. It is surely obvious that if you can be attacked, you are not invulnerable. You see attack as a real threat. That is because you believe that you can really attack. And what would have effects through you must also have effects on you. It is this law that will ultimately save you, but you are misusing it now. You must therefore learn how it can be used for your own best interests rather than against them.
Yeah, right there, it's saying to me that when I am believing I am attacked, I am not in my right-minded thinking. And I've mentioned this before, that there comes a time where your understandings and the truth that you're being shown change your perception to an understanding of what it is that you are perceiving happening with your brothers. That in truth, what they are doing is showing you what they are believing about themselves. when they are handing out those judgments, those attack thoughts, it is because they are believing something about themselves that is not true and projecting it out onto you. And in that same way, we do that same thing to them without even realizing we do it. When we judge and give opinions, we are telling them what we believe about ourselves. And that first paragraph is talking about that when you see attack as a real threat, it's because you believe that you can really be attacked because you aren't thinking correctly.
And you believe that you can attack.
Exactly. You think you can attack and be attacked.
Yeah.
You know, it goes right along with that lesson that we had, 2-3 days ago, talking about vengeance. I see a world of vengeance or something of that nature. Let's see. Nope, that was lesson 22. What I see is a form of vengeance.
And that lesson is actually reminding us that everything we see is attack thoughts.
Exactly. It goes right back into that. Everything we think, we know, and believe and see are attack thoughts. And it's learning the truth about those thoughts that we're believing in. 2, because your attack thoughts will be projected, you will fear attack. And if you fear attack, you must believe that you are not invulnerable. Attack thoughts therefore make you vulnerable in your own mind, which is where the attack thoughts are. Attack thoughts and invulnerability cannot be accepted together. They contradict each other. And this goes right back to what I was just saying. It's what you believe to be true, that you can be attacked, that you are vulnerable to attack based on your beliefs.
The idea for today introduces the thought that you always attack yourself first. If attack thoughts must entail the belief that you are vulnerable, their effect is to weaken you in your own eyes. Thus, they have attacked your perception of yourself. And because you believe in them, you can no longer believe in yourself. A false image of yourself has come to take place of what you are.
To take the place of what you are. So, yeah, the idea for today is introducing to you that you always attack yourself first. When you judge another, you are judging yourself. So when you attack another with your judgments, you're attacking yourself first because you are telling them what you believe about yourself. So when you say those hurtful, nasty things, you're saying that about yourself. And it's recognizing that that's what you're doing. Practice with today's idea will help you to understand that vulnerability or invulnerability is the result of your own thoughts. Nothing except your thoughts can attack you. Nothing except your thoughts can make you think you are vulnerable. And nothing except your thoughts can prove to you this is not so. Comes right back to the mind, folks, what you believe. Until you look at this stuff, you won't be able to see it. You'll gloss over it like, oh, no, that's not nothing. And it's not true. You got to look at it all. Bye.
6 practice periods are required in applying today's idea. A full 2 minutes should be attempted for each of them, although the time may be reduced to a minute if the discomfort is too great. Do not reduce it further.
The practice period should begin with repeating the idea for today, then closing your eyes and reviewing the unresolved questions whose outcomes are causing you concern. The concern may take the form of depression, worry, anger, a sense of imposition, fear, foreboding, or preoccupation. Any problem as yet unsettled that tends to recur in your thoughts during the day is a suitable subject. You will not be able to use very many for any one practice period, because a longer time than usual should be spent with each one. Today's idea should be applied as follows.
So I'd like to use I'll say what it says here in the book, and I'd like to use a real world situation that's coming up for me.
Okay.
It says, first, name the situation. I am concerned about blank. And so my situation is with this recording and this filming, and the fact that I'm using a cell phone and a webcam and various other things I just simply happen to have around to try to do these camera and audio recordings. And I'm constantly preoccupied with the frustration of the limitations of this equipment and the limitations of my finances. So to fill in that sentence, I am concerned about video recording.
Okay.
And then it says, then go over every possible outcome that has occurred to you in that connection and which has caused you concern, referring to each one quite specifically, saying, I'm afraid blank will happen. And in this case, I would say, I'm afraid that I'm going to get burned out on spending 6 to 12 hours a day post-production on these recordings, and that I'm not going to be able to keep up with doing a lesson a day of these recordings. So going on, if you are doing the exercises properly, actually, you know what? I want to back up here for a moment. The last sentence where it says, I'm afraid blank will happen. So I'm afraid that I will get burned out on doing the video recordings.
I get it.
Yeah.
So what I understand all of that, and I think I understand why it is that I keep hearing Holy Spirit saying to me to keep it simple and don't worry about the form, just worry about the content. So it's what's being said is what's important. And what I'm getting from what you were just sharing is that these fears tend to, because you go into it with the fear of having a 6 to 12 hour thing, you then manifest it.
Well, that's your perception of it.
Yeah, that's what I'm being shown, is that we then manifest that outcome. But if we go into it with an understanding of, okay, we're going to do this and it's going to be easy sailing, and not give into those fears and say, okay, it's going to work perfectly this time. He's going to allow it to work perfectly this time because he's shown me the things I need to do and there won't be any mistakes. And if we go into it with
Isn't that kind of like ignoring the elephant in the room?
No.
And saying, oh, these recordings are going to be perfect this time, even though they've never been perfect before. Even though my cell phone cannot keep an even synchronization for its audio and video, and particularly with the camcorder. Okay. So, I mean, it's like saying, well, I'm going to believe that aliens are going to land their UFO in my backyard and take me away from this prison, and because I'm thinking that, that's going to happen. Okay.
That's your choice.
Oh, believe me, I've hoped for that and prayed for that many times, and that hasn't happened.
Yes, dear, I know.
Yes.
It's something that I've been cognizant of for a very long time.
Yeah.
There's something about the pain and suffering that seems to be attached with this belief of nothing is ever going to work right.
I never said that nothing is ever going to work right. I'm saying that in doing 25 lessons so far, I haven't had a single one that...
Yes, we have.
No,
We've
we
had
haven't.
2. The
No.
one that I did there was fine and
That's
perfect.
because it
and
was.
the
That's because it was
third one
only
we did
you.
was perfect.
As soon as we introduce a second camera and second audio into the mix, there's problems with this equipment.
Well, the simplest solution is to put you over here on the couch with me, so it's one camera.
Yeah, I know you keep saying that.
And you keep refusing.
And that's my prerogative.
I know. And then your prerogative ends up giving you this nightmare you're in.
Yeah, well, I don't have to accept your solution to the problem.
True. You are permitted to continue as you are. And folks, this is what we talk about by creating our own hells. Because he has created his own hell with it in that way. And it's learning that we are choosing everything we go through. Seriously, we choose everything we go through with our choices and decisions in our belief that this is what needs to be done.
Or our belief that somebody else doesn't need to do it the way they're doing it. Like, say, well, somebody's having problems with their car, and you say to them, well, rather than worrying about your car, why don't you just walk to work? Because
if it's only a block away, why not?
Because then you won't have all these car problems. So you could say to that person, well, you're creating your own hell because you do have a choice to walk to work or take the bus. And so therefore, you are creating your own hell.
Or they could deal with the problem that they're having, get it fixed, and then there's no longer a problem.
And like in this situation, I don't have the money to fix the problem. So I have to deal with it, and I have to pray on what to do.
Okay. Well, you are finding solutions then within your problem. And that's all we can do.
My point here is that you can never tell another person what they should or shouldn't be doing.
And I'm not telling anyone what they should or shouldn't be doing.
Well, you seem to imply that I should be using one camera.
No.
And that my hell is created because I want to use 2 cameras.
What I stated was that you have other options, which I made the suggestion of having just the one camera in use and you being in front of the one camera next to me, so you're not having to splice in multiple video. And that was a thought that is another possibility.
Right. And
whether you choose it or not is up to you.
Right. And I could walk to work when the transmission of my car goes out too.
No, that's what we have a second vehicle for.
Well, eventually I have a second camera and we won't have these issues.
Okay. All right, moving on to 8. If you are doing the exercises properly, you should have some 5 or 6 distressing possibilities available for each situation you use, and quite possibly more. It is much more helpful to cover a few situations thoroughly than to touch on a larger number. As the list of anticipated outcomes for each situation continues, you will probably find some of them, especially those that occur to you toward the end, less acceptable to you. Try, however, to treat them all alike to whatever extent you can. So no picking and choosing, folks. As it comes up, look at it. And don't treat any of them differently. In a very real sense, they are all alike. They are just with a different judgment placed upon them, but they're all still a judgment.
After you have named each outcome of which you are afraid, tell yourself, that thought is an attack upon myself. And in my case, it is. It's an attack upon myself to think that I'm going to get burned out and not be able to do these videos anymore. It's a fear thought.
Yes.
Conclude each practice period by repeating today's idea to yourself once more.
My attack thoughts are attacking my invulnerability. That was lesson 26, folks. And that was chapter 3, The Innocent Perception, with section 4, Error and the Ego. Do the work, folks. Please, please, please do the work. Look at these things you're thinking and believing. Take them into Holy Spirit and ask Him for the correction. Ask Him for the truth of what it is you continue to do. I can't give you answers other than to share what it is I've experienced personally, the truths that I have been shown and the understandings I've been given. Alex can't give you answers either. Neither one of us are gurus. We are no different than you.
And as you see, we both still have disagreements. We still have fears within us. And this is a process.
Yeah. You know, and a lot of folks seem to think that as soon as they do all of the workbook or read all of the text, they'll be done and they can just go on with their lives living happily ever after. The term that comes to mind that I've been given for it is becoming a bliss ninny. That's the term that I've been given for it, where they think that by following and believing what they've been told blindly and just giving it all the belief they have in that moment is going to make it true. And in that respect, they want to fake their happiness and their awakenedness, and they want to deny anything that is not loving and happy and joyful. Any negative, hurtful thing that comes up for them or happens with them, they deny. And they truly are hurting themselves when they do this. And this stuff here, it's like you can't think that this is going to be the end. It's not. It is a process that you will continue doing probably for the rest of your life, looking at the things that come up until you do reach that state of full understanding and knowing of who you are without any confusion and misperceptions. You know, it's, like Jesus, He would walk on water, He would raise the dead, heal the sick, turn water to wine. Yet, even in His last moments on the cross, He had doubt. He was still working the process. When He yelled out, "Father, why have you forsaken me?" That was His one moment of doubt. When He went in after asking that question, He was shown the truth of what He was believing. And that is why He then stated, "Father, forgive them, for they know not what they do." Because you do not know what you do. With these things you think and believe to be true, you know not what you are doing to yourself, and thereby doing to your brother as well. Please, please, please do the work. The only one that can do this is you. The only one that can help you get through this is Holy Spirit. And He is the only one that can show you the truth. I can't show it to you. Alex can't show it to you. Reading a line from a book isn't going to show it to you. Only by taking these ideas and concepts within yourself and truly taking them in and looking at them and applying them as you are directed here will you get through this. Will you come to understand who you are? Until then, you are going to stay in the hell you've created for yourself. And not me or Alex or anyone else can pull you out of that. You're going to have to pull yourself out of that. Just like I did. Just like he is doing. No one else could do it for me. I had to do the work myself. I had to look at the shit I was believing in to be true. My core beliefs that I thought defined me and the world I am in. Do the work, folks. Please do the work. The only way to save the world is to heal yourself. It starts with you, and it starts within. You cannot heal the world until you heal yourself. You cannot heal another until you heal yourself. Until you get to right-minded thinking, you can't help anybody else. Because in truth, you can't even help yourself. Do the work. Thank you for joining us. We love you. Have a wonderful day. My name's Sabrina Reyenga.
And I'm Alex Reyenga.
Hugs, light, and blessing. Namaste.